Together we learn, together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. 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 Be cool, every teacher, every school.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Schul. I serve as the lead learner for the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves Cool, and you can always find out about everything we are doing right here at cool.us. That's CEWL.us. We are also proud to be sponsored by a grant from NEA and working closely with our state affiliate for the NEA, the SCEA. And if you're interested in joining our union, you can go to jointhescea.org. Hope you all are doing well tonight. I'm coming to you live from Columbia. I'm in a hotel room because tomorrow I will be going to the Adventure Museum to meet with a bunch of other groups from around the state at an event called Adventure Connects. And it was at Adventure Connects where I met tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Deborah DePaoli. She started her career in public education and community development at the age of 17, working with migrant farm workers and their children in Southern California. She served for years as a public school teacher and administrator, working with marginalized students, second language learners, under-resourced preschoolers, and the children of low-wage earners. Deborah has now lived in South Carolina for 18 years, where she currently works for the Institute for Child Success. That's the Institute for Child Success. She engages with families, agencies, and elected officials to advocate for children, equity in education, access to political power, and real opportunities for establishing generational wealth. Those are just some of the issues that Deborah is passionate about. And her presentation at the last Adventure Connects event really stood out to me. And I felt like we had the Venn diagram overlapped in a lot of areas in terms of what her values are and what she's working towards. So we invited her on tonight. And without further ado, let's bring on Deborah DePaoli. How are you doing tonight, Deborah?
I'm doing pretty well, Todd. How are you?
I'm doing great. Is there anything that was not in your bio that you'd like to share other than the fact that you have cats that you have outside the room?
That's right. Yeah, I have 3 cats and 2 dogs. The only other thing I would want to share is that I'm also a mother. I have 2 biological children. My daughter is a sophomore in college. My son is a senior in high school. And right now I have 2 foster sons living with us as well. So that also informs kind of the way I look at the world, being a mother myself.
So busy times, I'm sure, all the time. That's good.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask you a little bit more about, like, when I was reading through your bio about this work that you did with migrant farm workers in Southern California. Let's just kind of go back to that. I don't know if that's the sort of the origin story of Deborah, if that's kind of where your passion for all of this came from. But let's just go back to that. Tell a little bit more about that work that you did that you got you connected with this work for children.
Yeah, sure. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher. My 5th grade teacher, Miss York, inspired me, and I wanted to be a teacher. And I knew I wanted to teach in public school. So living in Southern California, I thought, oh, wow, I really need to learn Spanish, at least to be able to communicate with the parents of my children, my students. So out of high school, I had the opportunity to work with migrant farm laborers and their children, living in kind of the rural areas outside of San Diego. When I started, I had taken 2 years of high school Spanish. I could say things that were not super helpful, like I walk, you walked, we walked, they walked. So the woman who interviewed me saw something and said, yeah, we'd love to hire you. I started out kind of as a home visitor, kind of doing social work without much prep or training, but connecting families to resources in the community, advocating for children at their schools. And all the time, during that time, I was studying at the university to become a teacher. So I think it really changed my perspective, or established the foundation of my perspective in a couple ways. One, the fact that I always worked with families before I worked just with students really solidified in my mind the fact that children are part of a family. It's not just the 25 children that are sitting in your classroom or the 762 children at the school where you're working, but they come from a family, they come from a community. And that's something that we really need to be mindful of in the way that we interact with them. And then also that really showed me that all parents want what's best for their children, whether they are parents who may have low educational attainment themselves, whether they speak another language, have a different country of origin, whatever differences they may have. Parents that some people might dismiss, a parent who spent some time behind bars, or a parent who has struggled with a substance use disorder. It just really showed me that all parents want what's best for their children. And then those of us who work in education, we can really partner with parents in a powerful way to make that happen.
Yeah. So is there a particular sort of like memory that you have of that work, that when you were first starting out? Is there a story that you'd like to share, something that stands out from that work that inspired you to keep going? Because I mean, this has been obviously you've been in this arena with children for a long time now. Can you think of any story that stands out for you that was like, wow, that was like a moment that sort of solidified I'm where I'm supposed to be?
Yes, I'll share one story. There was a child who was assigned to me. Her name is Marilu, and she was in middle school at the time. And I was assigned to go visit her at her apartment once a week, help her with homework, be sure she was on track. She had had some behavioral challenges at school. As I got to know the family, she had 3 brothers and sisters. She and her mom and her 3 brothers and sisters lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. Mom was not able to read or write. She was the only one in her family that was not in special education. She did not have an IEP, but her 3 little brothers and sisters did. And the school that she was attending, because of some of the behavioral challenges she had decided that the thing to do for her was have her only go to school half day. Let her go to school from 8:30 to 11:30, and then eat lunch and go home. And I remember thinking at that time, who comes up with these policies? This is a child who has a high ACEs score, has dealt with a lot of traumas, is living in a neighborhood that's not particularly safe. We're going to send her home by herself while her mom's at work and her 3 little brothers and sisters are in elementary school to do what exactly? And a couple years, well, probably 3 years later, I ran into her again, and she was already a mother herself. And it just really broke my heart. I'm a passionate supporter of public education. And I believe, and I've seen, that the huge majority of teachers and school administrators are doing amazing things to support children and educate them. But then sometimes you hear about these kinds of policies that, instead of supporting a particular student who needs an extra measure of emotional support, practical support, academic support, instead there are sometimes these policies that actually are working against those students. So yes, Todd, I think that was just one of those moments where I was like, oh, wow, yes, I am going to stay in this arena and do what I can to be sure that all students, even students, that maybe have several factors working against them, are
Right.
getting what they need.
Right. And I remember now that you're talking, I remember us kind of talking a little bit, and I spoke about the documentary, The Rehumanizing School, and I think you and I talked about, and I think you talked about some of the things, and I was like, oh my, I was saying amen over and over again about what you're seeing in the schools in terms of policies that aren't really. they're not really serving the best interests of children. They're more serving the interests of adults who just have these arbitrary goals and want to. This is how I put it. They want to rob children of their childhood to meet the arbitrary goals of adults. I think one of the issues I have is I'm obviously also a fierce advocate for public education, but I'm also a fierce critic of the system and a lot of its policies.
Mhm.
And I think that's where you and I like connected in terms of like seeing a similar vision. What are some of the things that you saw in the classroom, and what are some of the things in your work now with Institute for Child Success? What are some of the things that you're seeing in schools that you would identify as some of the big targets? Like if you had a magic wand and you could change some things, what do you think we need to be looking at?
So I remember my first year teaching. I was teaching kindergarten in San Diego County. It was still half day kindergarten, so I had 32 children in the afternoon. My partner teacher had 32 I had 32 in the morning, she had 32 in the afternoon, and we had like a 20-minute overlap where we had 64 children in the room. It was amazing, let me tell you. So even so, with those challenges, it was a Title I school. Most of the children were learning English for the first time. The strength that we had, she and I and our teaching assistants, was that human connection that we had with those children, and then also with their families, right? And I think whenever we can strengthen those interpersonal relationships, where it's the relationships between the adults in the room and the children, but it's also setting up an environment where the children themselves are building and strengthening meaningful relationships together. That first year teaching, by every Friday, I swear my voice was gone because, all day you're going, "Oh, wow, look at you. Oh my goodness, you did it. Wow, go put that over there where the books, whatever it may be." And by Friday it was like, ugh. And I
Right.
had to learn, I can't be the only one pouring into these children. I need to set up an environment where they can pour into each other and they can learn to celebrate each other, support each other, and then really creating those allyships with their parents so that their parents were able to do things to support them. And I think like I said, in answer to your first question, all parents want to do what's best for their children. So how can we give parents tools so that they can contribute in a meaningful way to their child's academic success, behavioral success, all of those kinds of things? So I'm very much in favor of approaches or frameworks or anything, curriculum that centers the relationship between the teacher and the students and gives the teacher that flexibility and autonomy so that he or she can deliver the curriculum in a way that is meaningful to the children in their room. And like you said, this some of this arbitrary, some of the rules that some schools have, some of the objectives, it's just like, wow, I think we can do better with some of those things.
Yeah. So my sense is that one of the things we know that's happened is what used to be second grade has now been pushed down to kindergarten. So we have like a 2-year push down of what was standard curriculum. Second grade is now kindergarten, and then fourth is now second grade, and sixth, and now we have high school kids taking college classes, and all this stuff has been shifted down without any input from the students, without any real research or data to suggest whether or not this is good for their mental health or whatever. So my thing is, I you know, why are we doing this, and what are you like? You're an expert in child advocacy. What do we need to be doing and pushing for? Like, because it's like when I think about a kindergartner, they only get to be 5, 6 years old once, and putting them through essentially what was a second grade curriculum instead of like play centers and things like that we used to do that we had when I was in kindergarten. And then we ask, well, why are we doing this? And then it's like, well, we fell behind on NAEP and we've got to keep up with these international peers and these standardized tests, are reflective of the future success of America. And so we've got to push these kids along faster and faster and faster. And it's like, yeah, to what end? Like, so that
Mhm.
you have a bunch of kids who graduate and they're 2 years ahead, but they're riddled with anxiety, and their mental and emotional health and their social skills have not been developed because you had to shove in as much stuff into the curriculum as possible. Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Ooh, yes. That first year when I taught kindergarten, that was back in the day when you still wrote out report cards. And I remember my grandmother at that time being horrified. This was in 1994. We had to teach the children to count objects up to 20, count by memory up to 100, some of these different objectives. And she was horrified then because when my mother and my uncles were in kindergarten was only play. I mean, maybe you
Right.
read some stories and sang some songs. So she was just horrified, like, oh my goodness, this pressure they're putting on these children. Well, since 1994, exactly what you said, Todd, that is exactly what has happened. We've taken second grade curriculum, put it in kindergarten, then we've taken kindergarten curriculum and put it down into 3K, right?
Right.
Without any research. In fact, all the research actually shows us the opposite, right? And some of these countries that we like to quote all the time and say how successful they are, they don't actually start formalized literacy instruction until the age of 7. They
Right.
allow children to play, to develop those pre-literacy skills and really strengthen their approaches to learning. And then when they're 7 and their brains are more developed to the point where sound symbol relationship and all those things can kind of make sense, then they start the formalized literacy instruction. So yes, especially the past, oh gosh, since 2017, my focus has been on early education. Before that, I had taught elementary and middle and even adult ed. But focusing on these early years, we have got to slow that down. We have got to put the play centers back in kindergarten. Even when I taught first grade in 1995, they weren't the same play centers as the kindergarten had, but we had play centers in the afternoon for our first graders. They
Right.
were more academic, but they were hands-on. The children could move around the room. It's essential for healthy brain development. And like you said, not just academic development, but social, emotional, maintaining mental health, and allowing children to have fun.
And have a childhood, because that's the
Yes.
thing. That's the thing. To me, the moral question here is we're stealing something from the children that they can never get back, and that's a childhood that they can never get that time back. And then you ask, like, well, what's the ultimate benefit in that theft? And I don't think anybody can produce something other than, well, they learned to read faster. Well, they were gonna. It's like I think ever since I think about this, when my first child was born in 2001, I was kind of that mindset. Like, the little Einstein animated series came out, and I thought my child's got to be ready to read like as soon as possible, and I got to teach her, and like even teach her Spanish and stuff at 2, and like all these things. And it's like, I think as a parent, you get wrapped up in this comparison. Like, I've got to have my kid accelerated, and they've got to move along. So the parents weren't, the parents didn't take child psychology like those of us went to education programs did. They didn't study Piaget or Maslow or Erickson or any of this stuff. And
Mhm.
the thing is, we just ignore the foundational child psychology principles that we learn in college, because somehow education people were convinced that, like, success is how fast we can move them along and get them to score higher on these tests at an earlier age, and that's the goalpost that we're shooting for, and without even we're thinking about the consequences on the children, and not only the children but the educators who see this isn't right. I feel
Mhm.
conflicted about this. I can't keep doing this to kids. And so many of these good-hearted people just decided to get out of the profession because they felt like they were committing malpractice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So people love to throw around, different quotes or whatever. Oh, a child's brain is completely formed by the time they're 5. Well, okay, that's not even true at all. And yes, the physical development of the brain, 80% of it or whatever is there by the time they're 5. But that gets misconstrued, right? And then I think people hear that and they're like, "Oh my gosh, well then we better get them chock-a-block full of academics before that magic window closes."
Right.
There is no magic window. what that means is that they need those positive face-to-face verbal interactions with safe and trusted adults in a loving and safe atmosphere during those first 3 years, during those first 5 years. It doesn't mean sit them down, give them worksheets, and do flashcards with them, right? That's a totally skewed view of it. I see that my friend Vanessa Logan wrote something in the
Yes.
comments. Social awareness is necessary. Yes, and we want to see that. Think about the things that go wrong in middle school and high school, right? I'm not even going to list them all for you because you're aware. But all those things that go wrong sometimes by the time children are in their adolescence, so much of that is because of that lack of social awareness that Vanessa is talking about.
Right.
And when we use those early years to build joy, build creativity, have lots and lots of unstructured playtime, lots of outside playtime, lots of interaction, that sense of empathy, connection, compassion, social cohesion is so strong that will carry children
Right.
as they go through the rest of their
And yeah, you develop a healthy child and they will eventually learn to read unless they have some type of disability, and in which case you get them the support that they need. But like this idea that we have to rush kids along and completely rob them of things like recess. So we see recess time completely being stripped out of middle schools, and even at the elementary school level, I'm hearing a lot of kids don't even get recess time at elementary school. And this is what, for me, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, why I created this documentary, because the documentary is about two schools that aren't they don't have their hands tied by the test and punish, the testing industrial complex, I think is how Diane Ravitch puts it. They're not tied to that. So what you see in these schools is you see kids outdoors playing. There's outdoor classrooms. These kids, are spending time in nature, spending time playing, and they're doing things that are developmentally appropriate. And the staff is actually studying neuroscience instead of studying the new kind of, like, whatever the new curriculum or program that the district bought to try to accelerate learning, so that people at the district office can pat themselves on the back if the test scores go up by 10%, instead of saying, what do the kids really need? It's like, it's always what do the adults in the system need? What are they trying to accomplish? And without ever asking the kids, and a lot of the parents don't know enough to sort of question that system. And honestly, a lot of teachers who grew up in that kind of system, because now we have teachers who went to school in that system, they don't know any different. They never had recess either. They never had a normal kindergarten experience either. So they don't even know to question the system. And it's like, and it's become so calcified across the country and in every public school district, and everybody's scared to challenge it, because if you challenge it, if you say, no, I'm not going to push kids to do second grade work in kindergarten, and your test scores go down, then you get an article in the news. First of all, you don't get the blue ribbon school,
Right.
you don't get the award, and then you get an article in the paper saying your school's failing. And when your kids actually may be the healthiest kids in the state, and the happiest and the most well-adjusted and the most socially aware kids in the state, but because they're in kindergarten and can't read on a second grade level, and that's the bar you've set on failing. And that to me is one of the most immoral things that we've done to students and their teachers. And so if you're interested in what hope and inspiration, watch this documentary.
Yes, absolutely. When I was first teaching elementary school in the mid-90s in California, our kids had a morning recess that was 20 minutes long, 20 minutes of actual play. Like, that didn't include the bathroom and the getting water, 20 minutes of outside play. Then they had lunch in the cafeteria, and then they had lunch recess, which was another 20 minutes of outside play. And then they also had PE every single day. And in California, with the weather, that was usually outside. So they usually spent a little more than an hour every day outside at school. And I would take it upon myself. We had clipboards in the classroom. We went outside a lot just to do our academics, right? Like, take our work outside with us. Yeah. And those bold and brave schools, the kind of schools that are in your documentary, and other bold and brave schools across the nation who do things like, tripling the amount of recess that their students get, ironically often see the quote testing results that a lot of other places were trying to get to in the first place. And I think what
Right.
happened. Okay, so as a let's pretend I'm an administrator. I'm a school principal or I'm a district administrator. Oh my gosh, our reading scores have slowed down. They've declined. That fear kicks in.
Yep.
And it's a psychological thing. So people like literally go into like fight or flight. So now the people who are running our schools are making their decisions based on fear
Yep.
from an emotional state of survival,
That's
which is
right.
terrible. Which is
Right.
terrible. So then we
Right.
dig in even harder. We're like, you know what?
Right.
If it's good for them to have 20 spelling words a week, 40 would be better. Like,
Right.
good gracious, relax. I don't think
Right.
you have any data to show that is the case at all.
Yeah, it's all it's all about rigor and accountability and doing things with fidelity. If I swear to God, if I hear those words, it just every time I hear rigor, fidelity, and
Yes.
accountability, and those words just like raise my blood pressure by about 40%.
Oh, for real. Yeah, fidelity has got to be my worst, like the worst term going around in public ed today. Like, well, if they were just following that curriculum to fidelity.
Right.
Oh my
Yeah, if
goodness.
every teacher would just paint by the numbers the way we tell them to, and the
Right.
kids just, could follow like robots,
Mhm.
wouldn't this all be great? It's like no, it's amazing to me that I mean how we can recruit and retain teachers in that kind of a dynamic. Like the best teachers I always say are artists. They're
Mhm.
not they're not technicians.
Mm-mm.
And you turn teaching into a technical process where you say, here's the script you read, and then here's the assessment that you give, and here's the exact like assignments that you give.
Mhm.
Don't worry about what the kids are curious about or their
Mhm.
inquiries. Just follow this pacing guide and this script. I
Right.
can't think of anything like that would push away a good teacher more
Mhm.
than that kind of
Mhm.
dynamic. And yet
Mhm.
every year we seem to reinforce it more through this command and control system from state departments to school districts, from school districts to our admin teams, and then admin teams push that down into our classrooms. And of
Mhm.
course, the kids don't. What are the kids going to do? Here's
Right.
Here's what the kids do. You see an increase in these behavioral issues, and then the teachers are like, "What are we doing? The kids are all misbehaving." And I'm like, "They're the sane ones in the system."
Mhm.
Because
Yes.
they're seeing that this is bullshit,
Mhm.
and they're like, "This isn't what my brain needs. This isn't what
Right.
I
Mhm.
need. This is
Right.
what you need. This is what you
Mhm.
wanna do with your day.
Right.
It's not what I wanna do." So they
Mhm.
rebel like any sane person would, and then
Right.
they get in trouble, and the teachers get stressed out, and then we have this whole system that just the whole system's just set up to reward compliance for everybody from the top down to the students.
Yes.
Everybody's rewarded
Yes.
for compliance. And you have these
Compliant.
quarterly things in middle school and high school, like all the kids who complied the most essentially are the ones getting the awards.
Mhm.
And it's like the whole system set up for kids for a whole life of my validation's found externally. And it's
Yes.
like and then we wonder why kids grow up and they have this materialist mindset and framework and think that the meaning of their life is found in what they can purchase and what their status is and how many zeros are in their bank account.
Correct.
And then they get to the middle of their lives and they have this existential breakdown of like,
Yes.
I'm doing work that doesn't even mean anything to me. What am I doing with my life? Anyway, kind of
Yes,
I don't know.
completely, Todd. There's an obsession with compliance. Public school is a compliance machine. Like, compliance is the thing. Absolutely. Starting from preschool all the way up through university. University has depending on where you go, you may have a little more bandwidth, a little more
Right.
breadth or what have you. So what I noticed in my years as a classroom teacher and then as an administrator, most of our schools are set up on threats and bribes, right?
Right. Right.
Threats and bribes, threats and bribes. And that's what most teachers have been equipped with. And, there's all these different systems of threats and bribes. In fact, you can go to whole seminars, go to multi-day conferences to learn complex systems of threats and bribes. And then, so we focus on that. You do quote the right thing and you get, your name gets moved up on the clip chart or whatever it may be. You do the wrong thing, your name gets moved down. There's all kinds of ways of, shaming children publicly in order to motivate better behavior, which we know doesn't work. When I used to provide workshops, when I worked for the 4K program at one of our school districts here in South Carolina, I would talk to parents about obedience, right? And parents like, oh my gosh, I want my children to be obedient. Okay, let me ask you a question. If you are teaching your 4-year-old to always say yes to someone who's like in authority, what happens when that person who's in authority, I don't know, maybe your daughter's 14 and a 16-year-old boy is trying to get her to do something she's not ready for or not comfortable doing?
Right.
What if your 11-year-old is at the store with a friend and the friend is like, hey, put this in your pocket, nobody will see.
Right.
And you haven't given your child the opportunity to learn deeper principles for the way
Right.
they're going to live their lives. Now all they can do is comply, right? Because you've
Right.
taught them compliance. And it's like children are capable of so much more when we give them the opportunity to learn self-regulation, empathy, those kinds of things. So yes, I
Yes.
wholeheartedly hear what you're saying about the compliance, the threats and bribes, and then the, oh my gosh, what did we do?
What did we do? Yeah, right. It reminds me of Gabor Mate's work where he talks about when a child or any human is forced with the choice of holding on to their authenticity or their attachment, they will always choose attachment. And so what kids are actually learning through that compliance system at home and at school is I have to sacrifice who I am authentically in order to maintain the safety of my attachment. And then they go to school and then that transfers to the teacher. I have to sacrifice who I am authentically. I have to do what she tells me. When she tells me I have to sit down, I have to be quiet, do this work in order for this adult to accept me. So that attachment relationship is maintained, that feeling of safety. But I can't be authentically who I really am and then the kids who dare to try to be authentic and say, I don't like this, I don't want to do this shit. It's like those are the ones that get in trouble.
Yes.
And then they have it beaten out of them. Like you said, it's like it's rewards and punishments. And so like then they end up getting kicked out of school because and that's not good either. That's not, because then they're left to their own devices. That's not a good situation either. So it's like for me, this idea that compliance and obedience ought to be at the forefront is just like you said, it's so short-sighted.
Right. And if children weren't capable of developing other ways to guide behavior, then that's all we've got. Okay. Even very young children with the right kind of coaching and support are able to understand structure. They're able to understand routines that provides some of that sense of psychological safety and predictability. They're able to understand what it feels like to have a healthy connection with the adults at the school, with the other children in the room. And then that provides them the framework where they can still make mistakes and they're not going to be punished. There may be consequences, but it's not punitive, which is a really different feeling. And you can continue to build on that as children get older. I think that, again, it's a fear-based approach.
Yes.
We look at, the state of South Carolina passed the law that no devices during school hours.
Right.
Well, the school where my child attends had a bomb threat and a gun threat a couple of years ago. So guess what? I want my child to have his phone on his person where he can reach out to me if he needs to. Do I want my child to be focused on their phone during school or on learning? Obviously on learning. That said, are we going to take, like you said, sort of these arbitrary rules and make them become the focus of our schools?
Right.
how is that setting children up for success?
I don't think it is, but I think the reason why it exists, we talk about this a little bit in the documentary again. Plug. It's an issue of scale, right? So if
Mhm.
I have 2,000 kids in a building,
Mhm.
the rules and structures and procedures that I have in place are really designed to corral and control that many kids in one space, right?
Right.
And if I had a smaller school with 40, 50 kids, there can be a lot more flexibility in the way that I work with kids and in what we do. But when I have 2,000,
Mhm.
just trying to keep that from becoming chaos
Right.
is such a hard thing. But that's to me, that's a structural issue. For me, one of the biggest structural issues. If we really cared about children, I don't know that we would put them 1,200 kids in an elementary and
Right.
1,600 in a middle school, 2,000 plus in a high school, because I don't know that that environment aligns with the brain of a child. Um,
I'm
yeah,
not sure it aligns with the brain of anybody.
right,
Like,
right.
I mean, other than when I worked in public ed for 30 years, but beyond that, I mean, I've never worked in an organization where there were 700 of us in a building, 700 adults trying to be
Oh,
productive, and that's just not natural. And I think too, even when we have circumstances where we have, a larger number of children than we should at one site, when our obsession becomes compliance,
yeah,
so many resources are wasted on ensuring compliance. The
yes,
number of people, especially at a middle school or high school, whose whole day is cataloging the devices that were confiscated and, like, putting them, adding
right.
them to the online system and putting them in drawers according to alphabetical order in Ziploc bags for, when the child gets them back, and then there's all the seat time hours because the child had too many tardies, and then there's the in-school suspension and the out-of-school suspension and the detention. The number of staff hours that we spend on some of these things, and if we were able to, even if with the same number of children in that school and the same number of staff, if we were able to break that cycle and say, you know what, I have an idea. Let's take these 6 administrators and administrative staff whose sole focus is implementing punitive measures on students, and let's look for ways to turn that around and be proactive and build trusting relationships within our school family.
Yeah,
We could do so much better.
I think so. Yeah, I remember. I forgot the exact year, early 2000s. We had I was on the school improvement council, and we had some funds, and they wanted to spend it on putting up security cameras, and I said, I don't think this is a good idea to make this look more like a penitentiary here, and I understand why you want to do it. I get the benefit, but the psychological thing that happens in for a child when they now walk around and there's security cameras everywhere. I said, where does this end?
Mhm.
And they said, well, no, you're being, you're exaggerating, and you're being, I don't know, like Chicken Little. And I said, well, I don't think it ends here. And then it didn't. It didn't end there. There were more security cameras put in. Eventually, we had metal detectors and bag searches. And like you said, every teacher now had an additional duty to help search for bags and get the kids through the metal detectors.
Mhm.
And then we had the locks put on the doors and the cameras and the buzz in and the additional security officers. And it's like, at what point does society look at this and think this is not normal, and we've normalized it? Like, everybody just takes it for granted that now
Yes.
I have to, in order to get into a building, I have to buzz this thing and a camera looks at me and I've got to give them my license. And
Mhm.
like at the high school where my daughter goes, there's like a gate, a guarded gate, like it's an Air
Mhm.
Force, the old, the Air Force base has,
Yes.
and 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 cameras everywhere. I mean, we just take it for that. That's just become the water we swim in, and
Mhm.
nobody thinks, huh, maybe there's something wrong with the system when we have to have all of that in place.
Absolutely, Todd. And there's the thought, what you focus on, you get more of.
Right.
So when we have all of these complex, well-funded systems that are built around punitive measures, that's what's going to grow actually in those settings. Yes, I completely agree. And what you were saying about how that just becomes the water we swim in. And I think that's where, for me, when I ended up leaving public education and stepping into the nonprofit world and specifically advocacy, let me step out from maybe a more objective viewpoint
Right.
and be able to encourage others to do that as well. And now we can start to advocate for the changes that we know are needed,
Right.
right? And
Right.
because, like you said earlier, that the compliance goes from, maybe the State Department of Ed to the districts to local school administrators and then down to teachers, and it just kind of trickles down that way. What if instead we were listening to the experts, the children themselves,
100%.
their families, the
We
the
don't ever get
classmates?
child input on
No,
on
no, we
policies,
don't.
procedures. We don't, and if they do, it's like tacit. It's like, it's nothing substantive. They don't really
Right.
have any control in most systems. There's student councils, but like, they plan homecoming or whatever.
I was
That's
just gonna
like,
say, I get to plan the theme for prom this year, right.
yeah,
So, can we step back and bring those people who have the greatest lived experience, the highest level of expertise as a parent, as a child, as a classroom teacher, and make
right.
sure that their voices are the ones that are being centered? That was just such a compelling
Yeah.
mission for me or calling for me. And I think that there's still a lot of space for that. And we can show up and be polite. We don't have to organize a march. We don't have to have, posters that we're waving in front of the school or the, state house or what have you. But there are avenues and there are spaces where our voices can be heard, and
Mhm.
we can show up and not that we're watering down our messages or that we're selling out, not at all, but we're showing up in the spaces using the language that makes sense to the people who can help us change some of this.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
really become my focus.
And I really think this is something, we don't we're a very polarized society right now politically, but I do think there's some low hanging fruit where we do have this overlap where we do see. When I put out this kind of information, when I talk specifically about like there's too much testing, that we shouldn't have second grade push down to kindergarten, that kind of stuff, I have people on the far right and the far left and everybody in between seems to agree on. Very few people are like, no, I think it's great. In fact, let's have third, fourth grade work, and let's
Yes.
take away recess from everywhere, and they should never go outside, and they should never play in school. School's not for play; it's for learning, just learning, and like
Right.
nobody. I know
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I can't think of
Mm-mm.
that. The students definitely don't want it. The
No.
teachers, I think the vast majority of teachers don't want it. I think the
Mm.
parents don't want it. And then you have to ask, so I always ask myself, so nobody seems to want this
No.
system. So why do we keep perpetuating it? Why do we keep going? But before you answer that, I do want to give you an opportunity, since we're kind of coming close at the end of the time, to talk about Institute for Child Success. So feel free to take it wherever you want to, but I've got
Yeah,
the
sure.
website up there for people who want to learn more about that. But if you want to sort of segue
Okay, sure.
the
So
conversation,
yes, Institute for Child Success. Our vision is the success of all young children. We use the National Association of Educators of Young Children definition, meaning birth through age 8. And in a very broad general sense, we want to see those children succeeding, right? So not just academically, but health-wise and family stability and economic mobility and all those kinds of things. One of the biggest projects that I coordinate for the Institute for Child Success is our Early Childhood Common Agenda, which you can see on my T-shirt today. So we are a group. I think we have about maybe 500 now. People who have come together, parents, teachers, nonprofit staff, faith leaders, business owners, early care providers, people who care about young children and their families, to be sure that our lawmakers and policymakers understand the needs of young children. A lot of times when people think about education, they're not thinking about the younger ones. They're thinking more about middle, high school, and upper education. So just yesterday, we were at the State House advocating for a bill that would put more money in the pockets of early care providers through a tax bill.
Yeah.
So, and yesterday we had two moms in the room. They each had their children with them. We had childcare providers. We had people from across the community saying we need to be sure that parents have a place that their children can be safe during the day and where children feel loved and cared for and connected. So those kinds of things, we're always looking for more people to join the Early Childhood Common Agenda. We've become very visible because we show up anywhere and everywhere in large groups with our branded gear on so that people can't miss us. And I think it's one of my favorite things about this work is the way we can show up in those spaces where maybe typically there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to parents, to children, especially educators of young children don't seem to get even the same respect that a K through 12 teacher gets, which that in and of itself is problematic, but even more so for early care teachers. So finding opportunities where we can be in the room with senators, with state representatives, with our U.S. Delegation, talking to them about the needs of our youngest learners. I love seeing people develop those skills and building that confidence to use their voices to make these kinds of changes that we're talking about.
I appreciate that because I think, as much as our public school teachers, pre-K through 12 need a pay raise, I think a lot of the public would be shocked at the wages of our early childhood educators that are teaching 3-year-olds. Living essentially have like poverty wages. Like it's just and especially when you consider the importance of that work, because you're laying the foundation for that success or that hopefully they're going to have when they go into the public schools. All these kids that are having to go to childcare centers. These childcare centers in many cases are having such a hard time recruiting and retaining people because they just can't afford. They want to do the work, but they can't afford to live on the, whatever, $12 an hour or whatever it is. And it's such important work, and yet we pay doctors and lawyers and plenty of money. We pay football coaches plenty of money. And yet these people that are working with our most vulnerable population and the human beings that need the most attention and the most skill and expertise, those people are being paid like they work at a Subway. And it's that. Yeah.
Right. The median wage for childcare teachers in South Carolina is around $13. It tends to be a little bit higher, like in Charleston, Greenville, and Columbia, a little bit lower in some of our rural areas. When I was working with some teachers out in Sumter County, I had one of my 4-year-old kindergarten instructional assistants who literally left her job to go work at a gas station because the gas station had a cash bonus for signing on. She was just dynamic, amazing educator. And she did great in that job. Within a few months, she was, a shift manager and then moved up to be, a higher managerial position, which she never would have been able to do teaching in a 4-year-old classroom in a privately owned center.
There's no commission, there's no tips, there's no, and the budgets are so thin just to keep the center operating. It's just, without some kind of supplementation to that, and you want parents to be able to get to afford it as well. We want it's like this is a parental issue too. Like the parents, you want them to go and work and be a part of this economy, and yet
Right.
you're not even helping to subsidize or support them being able to hand their child off to somebody who's really well qualified and adept to help that child develop. It's not, I think too many people think of it, oh, it's just like babysitting. Well,
Mhm.
what's the big deal? And
Mhm.
they don't understand that there's so much more to it. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your voice. For those of you who want to learn more about Deborah's work, the website's right there, Institute for Child Success, and I'm sure that they can reach out to you. Your contact information, I'm sure, is on the website.
Absolutely.
I will see you tomorrow at Adventure, and I like I said, I appreciate your passion, and I appreciate you showing up tonight and sharing some thoughts and ideas. Anything else before we sign off that you want to share with folks?
Well, thank you, Todd, for giving me this space. And I would encourage each of you, take good care of yourselves. And I'm not saying that flippantly or lightly. Take good care of you. Take good care of you so that you have the strength and you have the resilience and you have the resources to use your voice in the spaces where you find yourself, not in defiance, not trying to be a rabble rouser, because that's not going to help, but using your influence and your voice to make the changes that you know we need to have. So please be gentle with yourself, take good care of yourself, get sleep, hydrate, movement, fulfill your needs as much as you can so that you'll have the strength to show up and advocate for our children.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow.
Sounds great, Todd. Thanks so much.
Good night. All right.
Good night.
All right, everybody. That was Deborah DePaoli. She is with she's the executive director of Institute for Child Success. You can go to their website, learn more about that. And she gave me the perfect sort of platform or sort of segue to talk about taking care of ourselves. One of the ways that educators in South Carolina can do that is by attending one of our wellness retreats. Yelena Popovich and I created this retreat model almost 10 years ago. And we now have it's evolved and it's gotten better and better. And any educator who works in a public school in South Carolina can attend our retreat. You do not have to be a member of the SCEA. However, it is a little bit cheaper. It's $100 cheaper for members of the SCEA. You can learn more about these wellness retreats at cool.us/retreat. These are secular, science-based retreats. They will take place in a beautiful retreat center called Indigo Nature Retreat in Old Fort, North Carolina. The first one, in fact, let me put the graphic. I have a graphic for you. The first one is June 25th through the 7th, and the second one is July 23rd through the 25th. The first one is almost sold out. So if you're wanting to go to the one in June, you better apply soon. And then the one in July is about a third of the way full at this point. You can read testimonials. You can learn more about exactly what we do at the wellness retreat. We do some mindfulness practice. We do some yoga. We do some walking. We have some really rich conversation. And the only people going are educators. And there's just about 12 people that go. So it's relatively intimate. You can bring a friend, a colleague that you work with. We would love to have you. It's $150 for members, $250 for non-members. That includes your lodging and a beautiful cabin, all of your meals, snacks, yoga. We even give you a choice of books that we'll order for you and have it ready for you at the retreat that's related to the content. So it's an amazing. And that's funded by a grant from NEA. So thanks to the National Education Association. They essentially are funding, 80 to 90% of your tuition for that. We just ask for you to pay a little bit so that you have some skin in the game. A couple of other things I want to share with you. If you are interested in doing some yoga, Alex Del Castillo has yoga resources. That's on the Cool website, cool.us/yoga. You can find that on the website. Also want to remind you that we do Cool coaching every Tuesday and Thursday night with Angie Brush, Stephanie Johnson, and Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder. Marcella is the founder and inventor of Cool Coaching. It's free online one-to-one support for induction teachers every Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 8 o'clock. Just go to cool.us/coaching. All you have to do is log on. You'll get put into a Zoom room with one of these three incredible educators, and you can ask questions and seek the support that you are looking for. We also have an episode of Cool Beans, which is our teacher induction show that's coming up next week, a week from tonight at 6 o'clock. We're going to be talking about using social media. If you haven't had a chance on the Cool website, Cassie Owens-Moore is a librarian at Seneca Middle School in Oconee County, does a series called Cool Books. And since it's Black History Month, she is going to be highlighting books that talk about Black culture. And this is going to be a 2-part series. So the first part is now on the Cool website. You can go to cool.us/books, or you can go to the homepage and it's there as well. Really, really good stuff. So if you're looking for some books for Black History Month and really to celebrate Black history throughout the year, it's a great video as a resource. Also, Pete Stone released a video called Why Trying to Change the System Isn't Going to Work, kind of related to the information we talked about tonight. So check out that. You can find cool.us/vibes, I think is the website, or you can find all the videos on the homepage. So thank you so much. I want to thank Deborah DePaoli again for her time tonight. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. You'll be able to find the full live stream probably early next week. You can go back onto Facebook and find it now, but it'll be posted to the Cool website at cool.us. And of course, before we leave, just want to mention we are brought to you by a grant from NEA, and we are supported fully by the South Carolina Education Association. If you are an educator, if you work in a school building in South Carolina, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, whatever, and you're interested in being a part of an association, getting, for educators, getting that liability insurance, all the benefits that NEA has to offer, just go to jointhescea.org and you can learn more. And again, if you are interested in the philosophy and seeing schools that actually do things the way that Deborah and I were kind of alluding to, check this documentary out. It's a 4-part documentary series called Rehumanizing School. It's free. We can come do screenings in your area if you're interested. The schools are in Floyd, Virginia, a small school, elementary school called Blue Mountain School, beautiful school, and then a high school called Springhouse Community School are highlighted in that documentary. There's 4 episodes. I think if you enjoyed tonight's conversation, I think you'd really enjoy that. Thanks so much again to Deborah, and thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week for an episode of Cool Beans right here, 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. Until then,
together we learn, together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school.